All right, I think I see everybody here. I have my team and Franchise Tax Board and the tax. All right, I think we have everyone, and it looks like we are live streaming. So welcome. This is the appeal of M and J Montag-Freedman. I am the lead administrative law judge, Sarah Hosey, and with me today are my panel members, Seth Elsom and Erica Parker. I want to thank the parties and participants for joining us today. Once we're on the record, we will have formal introductions by the parties. So before we go on the record, I will go over a couple of announcements and the outline for the hearing today. So the Office of Tax Appeals will be conducting today's hearing electronically with the agreement of all the parties and participants. Please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. Our stenographer, Ms. Alonzo, will be reporting this hearing verbatim. To ensure we have an accurate record, we ask that everyone speak one at a time and not speak over each other. Also, speak clearly and loudly. When needed, Ms. Alonzo will stop the hearing process and ask for clarification. After the hearing, Ms. Alonzo will produce the official hearing transcript, which will be available on the Office of Tax Appeals website. Today's proceedings are also being live streamed. The transcript and video recording are part of the public record and will be posted on our website under hearings. I want to remind today's participants and viewers that the Office of Tax Appeals is not a court, but an independent appeals body. The office is staffed by tax experts and is independent of the state's tax agencies. OTA does not engage in any ex parte communications with either party, and our decision will be based on the arguments and evidence provided by the parties on appeal in conjunction with an appropriate application of the law. Again, I am the lead judge for the purpose of conducting this hearing, but all three panel members are co-equal decision makers. If at any time we lose connection with someone, please let me know right away. The panel has read the briefs and examined the submitted exhibits, and we are looking forward to the arguments today. So if anytime you're confused or about the process, or if you have questions, please feel free to ask me for clarification. Okay, so at the pre-hearing conference, we discussed the issue in the case and the exhibits submitted by each party. We will put this in the record shortly, but let's go over the exhibits we have for today. So the exhibits discussed at the pre-hearing conference were appellants 1 through 10 and respondents A through N, but we have some new submissions. From appellants, I have exhibits 11, the affidavit of Michael Grossman, and exhibit 12, FTB notice 2020-02. Is that accurate, Mr. Pearl? Uh-oh. I can't hear you, Mr. Pearl. Are you?
Sorry. Yep.
Oh, there you are.
Now.
Good morning.
Good morning. That's correct.
Okay. And then the Franchise Tax Board, did you receive those exhibits? Ms. Watkins?
I can answer, we did.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mrs. Kent. Were there any objections to these documents?
No objections.
Okay, are we having some technical difficulties with, audio?
Yeah. It keeps freezing every so often.
I can hear you now, Ms. Watkins. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Let me know if you have any problems. Okay, so no objections from 11 and 12. Great, we'll put those on the record shortly. And then from FTB, I have an exhibit O, the comment list detail from May 30th, 2023. Is that right, Ms. Watkins or Mrs. Kent?
That's correct.
Okay, were there any other documents you had for today?
Nope, no other documents.
Great, and then Mr. Pearl, did you receive that exhibit?
Let me just double check
Sure.
that. I do not see that. Let me just see if my team had it. You can speak. Yeah, we're gonna download it right now. I'm not sure why I didn't notice it before.
Sure. That's why we check in with everybody. I will ask you about Mr. Grossman. I see that he's here today. Are you still planning to have him testify regarding the communications with FTB?
Yes,
Okay.
it's just not on camera.
Okay. Oh, hi,
Oh,
Mr.
there he
Grossman.
is. Sorry.
Yes.
Hello, welcome. Great. Okay, well, when we get started, we will swear you in first, and that way we can get the testimony, whatever facts we need under oath. And then we will go ahead and go back to Mr. Pearl with any arguments, or from both of you, whoever would like to argue versus factual testimony. And then we will have some time for questions, if any, and then we'll go to FTB's argument. And then we may have more questions from the panel. And then appellant has the 5 final minutes for a final statement. So that's how our time frame will work today. Are there any questions from the parties?
No, that's terrific.
No
Mr.
questions.
Pearl, thank you. Sorry, Ms. Watkins. Mr. Pearl, did you want a brief recess to look at that document, or would
It should be
you?
1 second. Someone's bringing it over to me as we speak.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, I have the transcript of O.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you had it if it's being referenced in the arguments, and that you're able to have time to respond if needed. Do you want
No.
to
I
move
think-
forward?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, so are there any questions before we go on the record? Hearing none. Okay, great. My panel ready? Okay, and it's my notes here. Hey, this is the appeal of M. Freedman and J. Montag-Freedman. The case, we are on the record. The case number is 2308-14077. Today is May 22nd, 2025, and it is 11:11 a.m. This hearing is being held virtually via Zoom. Again, I am the lead administrative law judge, Sarah Hosey, and with me today are my panel members, Seth Elsom and Erica Parker. Can I please have the parties identify themselves for the record, starting with appellants?
Alan Pearl, CPA.
Michael Grossman, CPA.
Andrea, excuse me.
Sorry, can I have the third person from the appellants state their name for the record?
Nan Huang, accountant.
Can you spell that for me, please?
NANHUNG.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then for the Franchise Tax Board?
Andrea Watkins.
Cynthia Kent.
Thank you. Okay, the issue on appeal today is whether appellant's claim for refund for the 2017 tax year is barred by the statute of limitations. We pre-marked exhibits 1 through 10 for appellant and A through N for respondent FTB at the pre-hearing conference held on May 10th, 2025. We had additional submissions from both parties, appellant exhibits 11 and 12, and from FTB exhibit O. Are there any objections to exhibits A through O. Appellants?
No,
No,
Thank you. Are there any objections to exhibits 1 through 12 from the respondent, FTB?
No objections.
Thank you. Having no objections, exhibits A through O and 1 through 12 are now admitted as evidence into the record. All right, we're going to start with appellant's testimony from Mr. Grossman. We're going to swear you in. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. Please begin your testimony however you'd like to do that today.
Okay, so we filed the 2017 tax returns for Mr. and Mrs. Friedman, claiming the withholding deduction that was from a pass-through entity of $11,073 on that 2017 return. That return, I believe, was filed in September of 2018 on a timely basis. And we asked to have the overpayment applied to the subsequent year. No, sorry. I'm sorry. That was supposed to be refunded? Alan, do you have that information?
no. 2017 return had a had an overpayment of 8178 that we wanted applied to the following year.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the returns. You sure it's applied or was it refunded?
It looks like an overpayment applied.
Excuse me, can I clarify, is this the individual return?
Yes. It is.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at I apologize. I was looking at the pass-through entity.
Yeah, the LLC return.
Yeah.
No
So then
worries.
on the individual return, the overpayment, we wanted a portion applied to, nope, we're bringing, it looks like it was all applied to the 2018 estimate.
right, this is on the LLC return. The
Now I
8170.
then I went to the individual on the CA 540 NR for the year 2017. We applied it to the 2018.
Right, so we didn't get any notification that the overpayment was denied or that it was incorrect. So we kept on claiming those amounts that were applied. There was no notification from the state that this was incorrect or there was any issue with that overpayment. And then we got to, Nan, can you just chime in as to what year when it became an issue? Was it 2020?
Yes, we we kept claiming those credits to be carried forward to the following years on the tax returns for several years. And then we realized that this was not correctly being applied. So we called the FTB to ask them to apply for the credits. And the agent I spoke to at that time told me that he saw these credits and he would he would follow to apply those credits as we indicated on our tax returns to the following years, which can be seen on the exhibit I, that the first catalog there. You can see from that. And the agent told me that he will call me back in 3 days or several days that after all the credits were applied. So they will send us a clearance of this kind of thing. So that's the basic information I got from the call to the FTB. So I always thought that the credits were there, and why it was not being applied to the following year is because that the processing time, that the FTB may need more time to process it.
And that's the gist of how we ended up in this situation where I guess you're claiming the statute has run, but it was because of incorrect information given to us over many phone calls from various agents.
And it's Alan Pearl again. And it wasn't really tax guidance. It was just going and giving us the impression that the funds were moved forward.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if the Franchise Tax Board has any questions regarding the factual testimony.
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me go to my panel. Ms. Parker, do you have any questions for the appellants?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Elsom, do you have any questions for the appellants?
I did have just a few questions, and either one of you can answer this. Were there any publications or guidance or materials that you relied on to, when filing the LLC return, to originally report the withholding credits as an overpayment allowable as a credit towards the following tax year? And can you just describe how you arrived at that determination to report it that way, rather than the way that FTB is stating that it should have been reported, which is allocated to the partners or the members of the LLC? I can rephrase that as,
Yeah. Well, you're
Did you
saying we
understand
filed
the question?
incorrectly? I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, just the question I'm asking is what did you rely upon to determine that the withholding credits that were paid, or excuse me, the withholding amounts should be treated as a overpayment and allowed as a credit towards the following tax year? Did you review any online material? Did you have any discussions internally, or was there any authority that you relied upon to make that determination? And can you just basically explain how you reported it this way?
Well, there was a tax overpayment and requested it to be applied to future tax liabilities. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Right. Let me chime in. It's Alan Pearl, and Michael, you'll maybe clarify a little bit. So there's the tax that comes from the pass-through entity tax form. Sorry.
540 NR.
540 NR. And that tax, that overpayment, or that tax that's reported there, then flows through to the individual tax return of Michael and Jennifer Freedman. On the personal tax return, the California non-resident, the 540 NR, at the end of the return, just the same as the federal government and in all states, you put down your tax withholding, your estimated taxes, or taxes through the pass-through entity tax. That compared to your tax liability, either there's a balance due or an overpayment. When you have an overpayment on the tax form itself, you have an option of refunding the money or applying that tax forward. Or you could split it between those two items. So it's basically common knowledge of tax forms in most cases. There are times that we specifically go into the instructions, but we didn't need the instructions nor a call to the FTB in order to go and determine how we wanted to allocate and post that money. So where we asked for it to be applied to the following tax year, which is fairly common practice for someone with tax liability, we would have assumed that we would have gotten corrected tax notices if the amount of money we were taking as a credit was improper.
And we kept on claiming that same overpayment on the 2018 return, on the 2019 return, and we did not receive any notice whatsoever from the state that the overpayment was incorrect and that it should, or something to that effect.
Okay, and I just want to clarify, we're referring to the Bayberry Media LLC return when we're
Correct.
discussing returns here. Okay,
Correct. Right.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let us move to the Franchise Tax Board for their argument. Ms. Watkins, are you ready to begin your presentation?
I am, thank you.
You have 10 minutes. Please begin when ready.
Good morning. The issue on appeal is whether the appellant's tax year 2017 refund claim is barred by the statute of limitations. After timely filing their personal income tax return, the appellants filed an amended return to report $8,178 of tax withholding not previously reported. The amended return acted as a claim for refund in that amount. The withholding at issue originated from tax withheld by Bayberry Media Holdings LLC, of which appellant husband is the sole owner. On its 2017 business return, Bayberry reported the withholding but did not request that the withholding be applied to its 2017 $800 annual tax and requested it be credited forward in its entirety to Bayberry's 2018 tax year. On its 2018 and 2019 returns, Bayberry continued to report the full withholding amount and requested it be credited forward in its entirety to its 2019 and 2020 tax years, respectively. On its 2020 and 2021 returns, Bayberry requested that the withholding be applied to its annual tax for each year and that the remainder of the overpayment be credited to each subsequent tax year. However, pursuant to California law, withholding credit can only be claimed by a pass-through entity to the extent of its entity level tax, and the remainder must be passed through to the entity's owner, who can then claim the withholding credit on their personal return. The entity cannot carry the credit forward to subsequent tax years. Upon review of Bayberry's 2020 and 2021 returns, FTB determined that the $800 annual tax for both years remain unpaid, as the credit forward of the withholding, which originated in tax year 2017, was improper, and therefore could not be used to satisfy the annual tax for either year. Appellants contend that upon receiving notice of this in November of 2022, they initiated various phone calls to FTB in which they received conflicting or incomplete information from FTB representatives regarding how to report and receive the withholding credit at issue. Appellants ultimately filed an amended 2017 personal tax return on June 15, 2023, in which they requested a refund of the withholding credit. However, the statute of limitations had already expired 8 months earlier on October 12th, 2022. Although appellants appear to contend that equitable estoppel should apply in this case to open the statute of limitations, as is outlined in the 2004 United States District Court decision in Danoff, D-A-N-O-F-F, v. United States, which was later affirmed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, federal courts have uniformly held that equitable estoppel cannot toll the statute of limitations in tax refund cases. In the appeal of Sedlacek, S-E-D-L-A-C-E-K, a 1986 Presidential Board of Equalization opinion, the board held that the misinformation provided by the FTB representatives in that case was insufficient to create estoppel because reliance on informal opinions offered by an FTB employee is not sufficient. More recently, in the Presidential 2018 OTA opinion, in the appeal of Sedillo, S-E-D-I-L-L-O, the OTA held that the doctrine of equitable estoppel only applies in rare and unusual circumstances, and that when FTB's instructions are alleged to be unclear or misleading, taxpayers must follow the law and not the instructions. Regardless, if relief under the doctrine of equitable estoppel was available, the taxpayer has the burden to prove that they detrimentally relied on representations made by FTB. In this case, the statute of limitations had already expired prior to appellant's phone calls to FTB, and therefore prior to any representations made by FTB employees. I provided a complete log of all the calls between the appellants and FTB on both the personal and business tax accounts. Those are FTB's exhibits I, M, and O. The first phone call to FTB regarding this issue was made on November 14th, 2022. The statute of limitations had expired prior to that call on October 12th, 2022. If the taxpayer would have had the same liability regardless of the alleged action of FTB, then the doctrine of equitable estoppel cannot apply. Appellant's tax year 2017 refund claim is time barred, and there is no equitable basis for suspending the statute of limitations. Therefore, I respectfully request that FTB's refund claim denial be affirmed. I'm happy to answer any questions from the panel.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins. Let me go to my panel to see if there are any questions. Ms. Parker, do you have any questions for FTB?
I do have a question regarding the LLC returns that were subsequently filed in 2018, 2019, 20, and on. When we look at the return, it appears that that taxpayer was paying its $800 annual LLC tax every year, and that wasn't being taken from that carryover that's now in dispute. Since we don't have access to that payment record, is that accurate to say that they were making $800 payments every year outside of this withholding credit that they were also reporting?
Yes, that's correct. They were making the $800 payment up until tax year 2020, and that's when they requested that the withholding credit be applied to the $800 tax. That was for 2020 and 2021. And then upon review of that, that's when FTB made the determination that they had improperly carried forward that credit.
So the reason for the initiation of actually looking at that carryover was when they tried to utilize it.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Elson, you have any questions for the Franchise Tax Board?
Yes, I did have a couple questions. And the first question I have is, it looks as though, or it sounds as though from appellant's testimony, they're relying on a basic calculation of what an overpayment is and how it's generally applied, at least on an individual level, which can be rolled over as a credit from year to year. And they're applying that to the LLC. And the question I have is for FTB, in the opening brief, you reference, of course, the revenue and tax section, which is guiding for this issue, and also reference the LLC booklet, and you have provided a copy of those instructions. But those instructions omit a discussion of what line 7, how that should be calculated or reported. And that's the overpayment allowed as a credit. And so my question is, can you explain why that discussion of that line item is omitted and what that line item is actually supposed to represent?
Yes, I can. So it actually is mentioned in the instructions. Let me pull that up. Sorry, it'll just take me a moment here.
No problem. I'm taking a look myself right now to make sure I didn't miss it. And this is Exhibit A, if that helps, and is on, looks like it would be on page 77 of the briefing file.
Okay, it should be Exhibit K, the 568 booklet instructions.
And my question is specifically for line 7. So this is for the 2017 tax year. And for that tax year, line 7 is where the overpayments allowed as a credit are reported.
Are you looking at the 568 instructions?
Yes, the 568 booklet, LLC booklet.
Okay. Yeah, so if you look at where it says line 8, withholding, it states that if the LLC was withheld upon by another entity, the LLC may either allocate the entire withholding credit to all its members or claim a portion on line 8, not to exceed the total tax and fee due, which in this case would be the $800 minimum tax, and then allocate the remaining portion to all its members. So the instructions clearly do indicate that line 8 could not exceed the actual tax due, which would have been $800 in this case. So that would have been the maximum that appellants, or rather Bayberry, could have entered on line 8 to satisfy that that minimum tax. And then the remainder would have had to be allocated to the partners, or partner in this case.
So I understand that that's how the withholdings are treated, or at least the instructions are instructing the taxpayer to report the withholdings. But my question again is for line 7, which is overpayment from prior year allowed as a credit. Are there any instructions anywhere in this booklet that explain to the taxpayer how that item is calculated or where it should be reported?
I would just say that an overpayment from a prior year allowed as a credit. There would be no overpayment allowed from a prior year in this case. So if anything was, if they had carried that forward, it was improper to begin with because it shouldn't have been allowed as a credit.
Can you explain how that credit is calculated though? Or is there any guidance anywhere for the taxpayers to rely on when they're determining that line item?
I would just refer back to the instructions for line 8.
Okay, so am I correct if I summarize that line 8, the withholding credit should be allocated to the partners, therefore they're not available to calculate an overpayment, which would be allowed as a credit towards the following tax year?
Exactly.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move back to appellant. You have 5 minutes for any final statements you'd like to make before we close the record for the case, including anything that was discussed just now with FTB and the line items and instructions and everything. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Oh, I think you're muted, Mr. Pearl.
There we go.
Hello, thank you.
In all also as attachment number 12, during the period of COVID, California, along with the federal government and most states, extended the statute of limitations for adding a number of months. So I'm not sure whether or not this specifically applies to this case. But at the same time, as we were making an error on our pass-through entity tax with the application of the money, we never received any response from the FTP that we were handling it correctly, saying where we were asking for money to be moved forward. And I think as an example is that if we took credit for $100,000 estimated tax payment that we never made or never existed, we should have received some kind of notification from FTP saying you're taking credit for something you're not eligible for or that you never paid. So whether it be on the pass-through entity tax vis-a-vis the individual return where we improperly applied an overpayment, there was lack of notice that something was incorrect. And that's why it wasn't until significantly later on when we applied the money to the individual return, that was the first notice we had that anything was done incorrectly from year to year on these returns. Michael?
That is correct. And it was beyond the statute, I guess, at that point. But, and it's only beyond the statute because of the neglect of the FTP for not sending any notification of any filing error or anything to that effect.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we conclude the hearing for today?
Can I respond to the COVID extension?
Yes, Ms. Watkins, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So in regard to the COVID-related extension, FTB did follow the IRS and did extend certain tax deadlines, which fell during years 2020 and 2021. But there were no extensions that would cover the pertinent time period at issue in this appeal. So there was nothing that would extend the October 12th, 2022 deadline in which to claim a refund. And then in addition, I would just state that had the appellants tried to apply the withholding credit in tax years 2017 and 2018, at that point, FTB would have prompted FTB to review the returns, and they would have received notice had they attempted to satisfy their $800 tax in those first 2 tax years. But because they didn't until years 2020 and 2021, FTB was not prompted to look at the returns because the appellants were making that $800 minimum tax payment each year.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back to Mr. Pearl or Mr. Grossman. Anything else from the appellants?
I
Not
don't.
I.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we are ready to submit the case. Evidence has been admitted into the record, and we have the arguments in your brief, as well as the oral arguments and testimony presented today. We now have a complete record from which to base our decision, and we are ready to submit the case. The record is now closed. This concludes the hearing for this appeal, and the parties should expect our written opinion no later than 100 days from today. With that, we are now off the record, and this hearing is adjourned. OTA's afternoon hearings will reconvene at 1 p.m. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. We appreciate everyone too.
Thank you.